planes crash, it's never the plane manufacturer's fault, right? Always pilot error. They claim the nuclear power industry is also plagued by rubbishy humans making errors and causing pretty much all of the accidents. That may well be true, but I would also point out to you that we are people who make errors, and you can put in systems that are almost fail-safe, but to have a system that's totally fail-safe like they claim is not possible. Dumping 2 hours worth of cold water into a melting core and then assuming you can attach hose pipes to it and then just flush all this water out that's now highly radioactive for as long as it takes before you can pour concrete over it, I think isn't really the answer I want. There was some talk about constructing new power stations underground, so if there's an issue you can just cap it. It should already be capped with concrete anyway, because containment, you don't want it getting out, and then we could seal it up that way. So I think I'd be more happy with that. In a very non-windy area, nowhere near any water sources, I would be fine with that. But nuclear power requires a large volume of water. That's why they're built on the coasts. Not a great place to put them if you're worried about tidal waves, or sea level rise, or storms, or hurricanes. They're also built on river systems. Again, not a great thing to do. Numerous flooding we've had in the Ottawa River recently. Nuclear safety is across the industry. She pointed out that safety first, but we're a business, so you have to operate. Yeah, that's what worries me. If the governments are running it and they're not doing it for profit, but they're doing it for nuclear power generation, I'd be much more relaxed. Sorry, but I would be. Some things government's good with. But they use risk, as I've said before, of 1 in 1 million. And that's not acceptable to me. The risk from a Chernobyl in some place like where I live in Ontario is simply not acceptable. We need the power, and we've had very, very much focus on fossil fuels, which is destroying the climate, and our air we're breathing, and the water we're drinking. And we've also focused on nuclear power, which is a risk factor that could at some point bite us badly. We've really neglected solar. We've neglected wind. We've neglected geothermal. We've really neglected building passive solar houses. We've really neglected dropping our dependency on electricity by proving ourselves more resilient to both the hot and the cold of weather and climate. And I think that's a mistake. Of course, there's very little money to be made for corporations in those sorts of endeavours. A lot of money to be made in large mega projects. She happened to mention the full site evacuations practice every 5 years, and she says that they grab a snack and some water, then they sit in the car for 4 hours trying to get out of Chalk River when they do the full site evacuation. And that again is not that reassuring to me. If it's that bad that close, how bad would it be in any big town anywhere near it? And there's a lot of big towns in Canada near our remaining nuclear power stations. So under business normal, nuclear power is the best option. Absolutely no question about that. But unfortunately, business normal is operating waste. Waste is a free product in our economy, right? We don't pay for waste, traditionally. It ignores the risks and the costs of the inevitable accidents that will occur. It also ignores the fact that we have no reasonable plan at this point to actually handle high-risk nuclear radioactive waste. A lot of talk, a lot of planning, a lot of discussion, but we still have no actual ability to deal with high-risk nuclear waste. The low-risk waste is stored on site. Again, I'm not really that happy with that. I would like them to have a reasonable plan to make that stuff safe and away from me and the air I breathe and the water I drink and the food I eat until it's safe. There's no particular reason why we can't have asphalt tiles altered and new construction to have solar tiles. People are working on that. And we could also recycle solar panels. People are working on that. We can also make solar panels excellent and more efficient. People are working on that. They're not spending mega billions of dollars building them, though, are they? They're building nuclear power plants with the mega dollars from the government and the power corporations. Remember, corporations control their monopoly. The national grid has to stay intact because the people that own it make a lot of money from owning it. Say the audience was mostly industry insiders with about half First Nations there. But at one point, people did get agitated. She said, there's no solution for nuclear waste, that's the myth. Actually, we probably know more about nuclear waste and how to manage than any other waste on the planet. And then she compared it to plastics. Yes, compared to plastics, yes, but that ignores the 10,000 years timescale of high-level nuclear waste where we're going to have death, miscarriages, and problems eating food. and the mayhem involved in a nuclear accident of that type of severity, then again there is no plan in place to deal with radioactive waste other than store it at the site and hope we can build deep depositories, which we have not built. She also compared it to cyanide. She said gram for gram, cyanide is more deadly than radioactive waste. People had a lot of problems with that. And I think you can think why. They haven't home the point we need power, we're dependent on it in the West. Large parts of the world aren't dependent on a grid and they're doing just fine, and there's no particular reason why we have to have a grid in this day and age. But there's no discussion on decreased use, no discussion on efficient use. It's all about producing more power for more people, because that will make them richer, so we can resource steal more and more and more and have more and more people doing that, and there will be no problem, there will be no hard level at some point. And of course, nuclear power without a technological society would be a very scary thing for anybody to have to deal with, and with a technological society it's pretty scary as well. Is that radiation scary where you don't know how to control it or measure it? She says that's not true, and I agree with her on that. But you got to wonder, you just really got to wonder how good an argument that is. Just because we can measure the radiation and we know how to transport it and deal with it in peaceful ways, unless it escapes, in which case we gather it in big sacks and try and shove it somewhere we don't know where. That's not an argument for having increased radiation in the environment. It really isn't. It's an argument for being very careful about having that technology in the place. She claimed that for all new power stations, remember there are none in Canada, that the disposal and decommissioning is fully economically sourced and figured out before they start to build it. Environment Canada were present and told her quite clearly that is not true. She also claimed that the risk analysis and what we do to inhibit risk is also done for best case scenario. Environment Canada said that in all their dealings with the nuclear power station industry in Canada, cost was the predominant idea that they were dealing with when we were talking to power people about safety, minimising cost. This isn't a direct attack on nuclear power itself, but she pointed out that the research grants are held at arm's length from the power station producers and owners, so the research that's being done is untainted by bias. That's not true, as I've said before. If you are dependent on funding from the private sector to then get matching grants from the government, that will bias your topics, because if your topic is to show the nuclear power station should be closed down, I can guarantee the nuclear power industry is not going to fund you. There's a whole big section on the future of nuclear power, and basically the future is going to be radioactive, if you pardon the pun. That's what I wrote down. But it talks about different types of reactors they're looking at. All of them are kind of like freaky to me, like sodium reactors and stuff like that. We use liquid sodium as the coolant and the transportation medium. That really scared me. Sodium is quite volatile when in contact with water or oxygen. It's a fun talk, and what they basically focused on, not in great detail but I highlighted more, is nuclear power has now sort of not given up on the idea of the Fukushima-sized power plants, 3 Mile Island plants. Although they're being built all across the world, what Canada's doing now, we're looking at making reactors, nuclear power reactors, that are basically the size of a truck, so they can be trucked into First Nations areas and give them power. Sounds great. Certainly there would be a need for that. There wasn't any discussion about transportation safety or decommissioning or what we're going to do with these reactor cores and all the rest of it, and who's going to actually service them. That was interesting. They also said that these reactors, once developed, because remember we're going to take a lot of money from the government, from taxpayers, to pay for the research for this, they are then going to be able to be sold to places like Africa, which isn't a place, it's a continent, and I wish people would get over themselves with that one. But one of the 47 countries or 48 countries of Africa can buy Canadian reactors that are the size of trucks, and then they can just bring in more reactors and add them together if they need more power, and that would give power to all large parts of the continent of Africa, which would be a great thing because they'd be able to consume more and they'd be richer. If there's no limit to growth, that's true. If there is no risks providing radioactive isotopes in large amounts to foreign countries, if there's no risk of disposal or issues with permafrost stability in Canada's north. The final quote was absolutely wonderful. I know it's sure because I put her email on it. Our analysis demonstrates that realising nuclear energy's potential is essential to achieve a deeply decarbonised energy future in many regions of the world. Possibly. The quote's actually from a guy from TEPCO. That's Tokyo Power, who owned Fukushima. Well, you enjoyed that. I enjoyed the course. It taught me a lot that I didn't know. It taught me a lot I did know. And I do remain committed to the prospect of a nuclear-powered future. I think it is an important adjunct, but I really don't want it in the hands of private corporations. I think it's ludicrous to have private corporations making profit and using nuclear power for profit in a situation where if they cut corners and it goes wrong, hundreds of thousands to millions of people are going to have to leave their homes and never go back, or not go back for years. That strikes me as just simply stupid. It's such a national security risk for each country that has nuclear power stations. It really should be controlled by the government, and we shouldn't be seeking to reduce costs by making it private. It may be a bit socialist for you, but that's what I think. Anyway, enjoyed the course. Toodles.
In March of 2011, this accident was caused by the tsunami shutting down the power. So, interestingly, the owners of the Fukushima Daiichi plants were found negligent. They had been told to upgrade some of their systems, so their generators needed to have some upgrades. They did not do those upgrades to the generators. They did that when the tsunami hit, and we shut down all of our generators. Then we had inadequate cooling of our reactor. So the country in the world has a mandate for a geological repository if they have nuclear program. We are working on our deep geological repository right now with the NWMO. And it is a way of storing waste in a safe environment, in a safe state for a long period of time.